Alright, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. The emergency department at 1:36 a.m. Moved with a tired kind of rhythm. Not slow. Not calm. Just worn down enough that mistakes could slip through if no one was watching closely. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Rain tapped steadily against the ambulance bay doors. A television in the waiting area played to no one in particular. Two patients sat spaced apart, half asleep, wrapped in thin blankets. Inside the treatment corridor, the night shift worked through routine. Charts. Vitals. Quiet conversations. Mara Quinn stepped in through the staff entrance without drawing attention. Her badge caught the light briefly before settling against her scrub top. New enough to look out of place. The word probationary printed beneath her name in small, clinical text. No one greeted her. No one needed to. She moved straight past the assignment board and into the supply alcove. A drawer sat slightly open. Medication labels inside had shifted just enough to slow someone down later. Mara adjusted them one by one. Each vial turned outward. Each label aligned. She didn't rush. Didn't announce what she was doing. She closed the drawer softly and moved to the next station. Suction canister. Half full. Not logged. She replaced it. Checked the seal. Ran a brief test. The machine responded with a steady pull. Good. Further down, a trauma kit sat on the lower shelf. Unsealed. Restocked incorrectly. Gauze where airway tools should be. Mara corrected it without hesitation. Airway equipment front. Bleed control second. Everything placed in the order it would be needed. Not the order someone had thrown it back in. At the nurse's station, a resident leaned back in his chair, watching her for a moment. You always do that? He asked. Mara glanced up briefly. Do what? Check everything like it's wrong already. A faint smile from another nurse. The resident shrugged. Like the charts are lying to you or something. Mara held his gaze for half a second. Then looked back down. Just making sure, she said. No defense. No explanation. He chuckled lightly and turned back to his screen. Careful, he added. You keep that up, they'll start giving you actual responsibility. A few quiet laughs followed. Not unkind. Not supportive either. Just part of the rhythm. Mara moved to the charting station. Locked the restock. Updated the suction replacement. Clean. Precise. No extra notes. A name flashed on the board. Room 5. Medication pending. She picked up the chart. Read quickly. Then again. A small detail caught her. Allergy listed. Medication already queued that conflicted. Not dramatic. Not immediate. But real. She walked to the medication cart. Adjusted the order. Substituted the correct option. Updated the chart. No announcement. No correction call-out. When the nurse assigned to the room returned, the change was already in place. She paused briefly, checked the screen, then moved on. No one asked who had fixed it. No one needed to. Mara returned the chart to its place. Invisible work. Complete. At the far end of the corridor, a security guard leaned against the wall near the ambulance bay entrance. Arms crossed. Half watching. Half waiting. Another guard sat behind the small desk near intake, scrolling slowly through his phone. Nothing about their posture suggested urgency or concern. Just presence. Routine. The kind of security that existed because it was supposed to. Not because anything had happened. Mara's eyes passed over them once, then moved on. The waiting room remained quiet. The hallway steady. The monitors soft. The kind of night where nothing seemed urgent. Until it did. At 1:48 a.m., the radio at the central station crackled. A short burst of static. Then a voice. Inbound trauma, 5 minutes out. The charge nurse reached for the receiver. Go ahead. A pause. Longer than usual. Male, mid-30s. Stabilized in transit. Limited information available. The charge nurse frowned slightly. Mechanism. Another pause. Unclear. That shifted things. Not loudly, but enough. Vitals? She asked. Currently holding. No details. No numbers. Just holding. The charge nurse's grip tightened slightly on the receiver. Any additional notes? Silence. Then, negative. The line clicked off. The room didn't react immediately, but the rhythm changed. Subtly. Conversations shortened. Movement sharpened. The kind of alert that didn't provide enough information. Forced people to fill in the gaps themselves. And that made everything slower. Not faster. Mara was already moving. Not toward the center. Not toward attention. She stepped into the trauma bay. Checked the monitor connections. Adjusted the oxygen line. Pulled an extra set of gloves into place. Verified the suction again. Then paused. Just for a moment. Looking at the empty bed. The clean sheet. The space where the unknown would arrive. No rush. No tension in her posture. Just quiet readiness. Behind her, the resident stepped in. Let's see what mystery case we've got tonight, he said. Mara didn't respond. Her eye stayed on the setup. Because the problem wasn't what they knew. It was what they didn't. And in that silence, before the ambulance doors opened, the floor understood something without saying it. This wasn't routine. They just didn't know why yet. The ambulance doors opened without urgency. No shouted countdown. No rushed commands. Just controlled movement. The gurney rolled in steady, guided by 2 paramedics who said very little. Behind them, 2 men followed. Not family. Not standard security. They moved with purpose, but without drawing attention to it. Hands free. Eye scanning. Spacing consistent. Mara noticed it before anyone else reacted. Not because it was obvious. Because it was practiced. The patient lay still. Oxygen mask in place. For already running. Bandaging tight across the left side of his torso. Clean. Too clean. The charge nurse stepped forward. Name. One of the escorts answered. Daniel Cross. Flat. Immediate. No hesitation. The nurse nodded and wrote it down. Mechanism of injury. Fall, the escort said. Same tone. No detail. The resident exhaled quietly. Of course it is, he muttered under his breath. Another midnight VIP who can't explain what happened. A few staff members exchanged looks. Not concern. Annoyance. Because cases like this slowed everything down. Because incomplete stories made the work harder. The gurney locked into place. Monitors connected. Vitals pulled. The patient's breathing remained controlled. Not stable. Managed. Mara stepped in. Gloves already on. She took the left side. Adjusted the four line slightly. Check the flow rate. Then the bandage. Not removing it. Just feeling the tension. Lead. 2 types. Outer hospital wrap. Underneath. Something else. Different material. Different pattern. She didn't react. Didn't pause. Just noted it. The resident leaned over the patient. BP's holding, he said. We'll scan, patch, and move him upstairs. Routine. Dismissive. Already decided. The attending physician entered a moment later. Coat unbuttoned. Expression tired. What do we have? Fall, the resident repeated. Torso injury. Stable enough. The attending glanced at the patient briefly, then at the escorts. Any internal involvement? Unknown, one of them replied. Still too precise. Still too controlled. The attending gave a short nod. Fine. Let's not make this complicated. Mara moved to the medication tray. Prepared what was needed. Standard. Efficient. Invisible. But her eye stayed on the details. The wound path. Entry angle. Positioning. None of it aligned cleanly with the fall. Not impossible, but wrong. The for insertion point caught her attention next. Tape placed correctly, but the angle. Slightly off from standard ER placement. More like field access. She followed the line down. There. Near the insertion site. A marking. Faint. Almost hidden under the tape. Not a hospital label. Not random. Deliberate. Her hand moved smoothly, adjusting the tape as if checking stability. But really, confirming. Yes. Coded. Short. Minimal. The kind of marking that wasn't meant to be seen, unless you knew where to look. Mara stepped back half a pace. Breathing steady. No change in her expression. The room continued moving around her. Routine. Assumptions already in place. Prep for imaging, the attending said. The resident nodded. Let's move. Mara picked up the chart. Reviewed it quickly. Then again. Alias. Minimal history. No external verification. Too clean. Too empty. Her mind moved through the possibilities. Not fast. Not reactive. Structured. Layer dressing. Field style 4. Coded marking. Controlled escorts. Minimal information. And the silence. Not confusion. Not panic. Silence that came from knowing exactly what not to say. She looked at the patient again. Still breathing. Still holding. Because someone had already done the hard part. Before he arrived. Moral weight settled in quietly. She could ignore it. Continue the sequence. Stay in the background. No questions. No attention. That was the safer path. The expected one. Ooh. She could mark it. Not loudly. Not publicly. Just enough to signal that something didn't match. Her fingers tightened slightly around the chart. Then relaxed. Decision made. Mara stepped to the terminal. Entered the chart. Her movement slow enough to look routine. Normal documentation. Vitals. Medications. Observations. Then, one additional entry. Short. Technical. Placed exactly where it would not be obvious to most. An internal security concern code. Old. Rarely used. Not part of standard ER workflow. Her finger hovered for a fraction of a second, then pressed confirm. The system accepted it. No alert. No sound. Nothing visible changed. She logged out, stepped away, returned to the bedside, adjusted the oxygen line, checked the monitor. Just another nurse completing her tasks. Behind her, the resident glanced at the chart briefly. Didn't notice anything unusual. The attending moved toward the imaging corridor. "Let's go," he said. The escorts exchanged a look. Small. Quick. But enough. Mara saw it. And in that moment, without a word spoken, the silence in the room changed. Because something had been recognized. And something had just been flagged. That the room wasn't ready to understand. The chain started at the terminal. Quiet. Almost invisible. The charge nurse leaned over the station, scanning the patient's chart as the transport team prepared to move him toward imaging. Her eyes moved quickly. Vitals. Medications. Notes. Then, they stopped. A small entry. Out of place. Not incorrect. But not routine. She leaned closer. Read it again. Then straightened slightly. Quinn. Mara looked up from the bedside. The charge nurse tapped the screen once. What is this? Mara stepped over. Calm. Unhurried. She read the entry without reacting. I placed that, she said. The charge nurse's expression tightened. You flagged this as a security concern? Yes. A short silence. The resident turned his chair slightly. What? He asked. The charge nurse didn't answer him. Her attention stayed on Mara. You're on probation, she said quietly. You don't make calls like that. Mara didn't shift her posture. It's not a call, she said. It's an observation. The resident stood now, stepping closer. Let me see that. He leaned in, scanned the entry. Then exhaled through his nose. You've got to be kidding. He looked at Mara. This isn't your job. The attending, already halfway toward the corridor, turned back. What's the delay? The resident gestured toward the screen. She flagged the patient. The attending stepped in. Read quickly. Then looked up. At Mara. You're playing security now? He asked. The tone wasn't loud, but it carried weight. Mara met his gaze briefly, then looked back at the patient. No, she said. I documented a concern. The attending shook his head once. This is exactly why we don't give new staff room to improvise. He stepped closer. Clear it. Simple. Direct. Not a discussion. Mara's hands remained steady on the patient's full line. She adjusted the flow slightly. Checked the monitor. Then spoke. I can't. The room shifted. Not dramatically, but enough. The resident let out a quiet laugh. You can't. The attending's expression hardened. Explain. Mara didn't rush. Didn't defend. She kept her voice even. The WAM pattern doesn't match the stated mechanism, she said. And the line marking indicates prior controlled access outside standard civilian protocol. The resident rolled his eyes. That's speculation. Mara shook her head slightly. It's not. The attending crossed his arms. And the security angle. Mara glanced once toward the escorts. Then back to the chart. Chain of custody is unclear, she said. If that's wrong, we risk losing control of the patient before we understand who's responsible for him. Silence. Short. Measured. The resident stepped forward again. You're building a story out of fragments. Mara didn't respond to him. She returned to the bedside, adjusted the oxygen mask slightly, checked the patient's breathing, then documented the change. Clean. Precise. No extra movement. The attending watched her for a moment, then exhaled. This is unnecessary, he said. We don't delay care for hypotheticals. Mara didn't look up. I'm not delaying care. Then clear the flag. She paused, just long enough to be noticed. No. The word landed quietly, but it held. Behind her, one of the escorts shifted his stance. A small movement, but the second escort noticed. Their eyes met. Briefly, then returned forward. That was enough. Mara saw it. Confirmation. Not proof, but alignment. The charge nurse stepped in. Quinn, this isn't a debate. Mara nodded slightly. I understand. Then fix it. Mara finished securing the 4. Check the monitor again. Then step back. I won't remove it, she said. The room tightened, because refusal wasn't part of the normal flow. The resident moved to the terminal. Fine, he said. I'll clear it. He logged in quickly, navigated to the chart. His fingers moved with confidence. Authority assumed. Routine override. See? He said under his breath. Problem solved. Mara didn't move. Didn't argue. She picked up a pen, updated a small detail in the chart. Then another. Precise documentation. Buying time without drawing attention to it. The resident clicked through the system. Found the flag. Selected override. Paused. Admin access required, he muttered. He frowned. Entered credentials again. The system hesitated. Then, before he could complete the command, the light shifted. Not off. Just dimmed slightly. A tone sounded overhead. Sharp. Controlled. Every monitor in the room flickered once, then stabilized. The charge nurse looked up. What was that? The answer came from the ceiling. A voice. Calm. Automated. Attention. Facility entering controlled access mode. All external exits are now secured. The resident froze. Wait, what? Another tone. Elevator function restricted. Movement limited to assigned zones. The charge nurse stepped back from the terminal. That's not. The doors at the far end of the corridor locked with a heavy, final sound. One after another. Magnetic seals engaging. The security guard near the entrance stood up abruptly. What's going on? He called out. No one answered, because no one in the room had triggered it. The attending looked at the screen, then at Mara. For the first time, not dismissive, not irritated, trying to understand. Mara stood still, hands at her sides, eyes on the patient, because the sequence had moved past discussion, passed out, into consequence. And in the silence that followed the lockdown, the meaning of the flag arrived all at once. The lockdown settled in layers. Doors sealed. Elevators stopped between floors. Access points turned from routine passageways into barriers. No alarms. No flashing lights. Just controlled restriction. That made it worse. Because it meant someone had chosen this. Not reacted to it. The ER held still for a moment. Then the questions began. What is this? Is this a drill? Why are the doors locked? Voices rose. Not panic yet, but close. The security guard near the entrance moved to the doors, testing the handle. It didn't move. He tried again. Nothing. This isn't standard, he said, turning back. We don't lock like this. The charge nurse picked up the phone. No dial tone. She set it down slowly. The resident stepped away from the terminal. This is because of the flag, he said, looking at Mara. Not accusing. Trying to make sense of it. The attending didn't respond. He was watching the corridor. Listening. Waiting. Then, footsteps. Not rushed. Not loud. But coordinated. Multiple. In rhythm. The doors at the far end of the corridor opened. Not forced. Access granted. 3 individuals stepped through first. Then 2 more behind them. Dark jackets. No visible insignia. No visible weapons. But the way they moved left no question about authority. They didn't look around. They didn't hesitate. They already knew where they were going. The lead agent stopped just inside the ER, took in the room in a single glance, then stepped forward. Everyone remain where you are, he said. His voice was calm, not raised, but it carried. Conversation stopped, because it wasn't a request. It didn't sound like one. Assigned zones only, he continued. Do not move patients unless instructed. The charge nurse stepped forward. You can't just lock down a hospital, she said. We have? The agent didn't interrupt her. He just looked at her. And something in that look closed the rest of the sentence before it formed. The waiting room doors sealed behind them. A child's voice rose from the far side. Mom. The sound cut through everything. Fear finally finding shape. Mara turned. Room 7. The small boy she had checked earlier sat upright now, eyes wide, hands gripping the blanket. His mother leaned over him, trying to stay calm. What's happening? She asked. No one answered. Because no one knew. The resident took a step back. This looks like an active threat protocol, he said quietly. The word spread faster than anything else. Active threat. Active shooter. The wrong conclusion. But the most immediate one. The room tightened. Staff glanced toward exits that no longer opened. Patients shifted in their beds. Monitors continued their steady rhythm. Unaware. Unaffected. Mara moved. Not toward the agents. Not toward the center. She stepped into room 7. Slow. Measured. The boy's eyes locked onto her. Are we in trouble? He asked. His voice small. Carefully controlled. Mara knelt beside the bed. No, she said. Simple. Certain. She adjusted his blanket slightly. Checked his monitor. Normal. Stable. You're safe, she added. The mother looked at her. Searching. Mara met her gaze. Held it. Just long enough. No explanation. Just presence. The boy's grip loosened slightly. Not calm, but anchored. Mara stood. Moved to the 4th stand. straightened the line, then stepped back into the corridor. Her bay. She looked at it once, then began adjusting. Supplies aligned. Extra gloves within reach. Medication trays cleared and reordered. Not dramatic. Not urgent. Just prepared. Because whatever this was, it wasn't ending quickly. Behind her, the agent moved through the ER. Not searching randomly. Checking positions. Verifying. One paused near the nurse's station. Looked at the terminal. Then at the charge nurse. Status of the patient. He asked. Stable, she replied. Pending imaging. He nodded once, then looked toward the trauma bay, where the patient remained. Where Mara stood. The lead agent stepped forward. The room parted slightly. Not intentionally. Just enough to give him a clear path. He stopped near the bed, studied the patient, then turned. Who flagged him? The question landed flat. Direct. No accusation. No emotion. But everything in the room shifted around it. The resident looked at the charge nurse. The charge nurse looked at the attending. The attending hesitated. Just a fraction. Then, without speaking, his eyes moved. Toward Mara. That was enough. The resident followed the glance. Then the nurse. Then the security guard. One by one. The direction aligned. Until the entire room pointed. Without pointing, the lead agent followed their line of sight. His gaze settled on Mara, still standing near the bed. Hands at her sides. Calm. Unmoving. For a moment, nothing happened. Then he stepped toward her. The distance closed. Measured. Controlled. He stopped just in front of her. Close enough to see details. Close enough to read her. His eyes dropped briefly. To her badge. Then back to her face. Something in his expression shifted. Not surprise. Recognition. Small. But real. And in that instant, before a single word was spoken, the tone of the room changed completely. Because whatever this was, it wasn't just about the patient anymore. It was about her. The agent did not raise his voice. He didn't need to. What did you see? He asked. The question was directed only at Mara. No one else. Not the attending. Not the charge nurse. Just her. Mara met his gaze briefly, then shifted her focus back to the patient's monitor. Still holding. For now. She answered without turning fully. Inconsistency in wound presentation, she said. And prior intervention outside standard civilian protocols. Her voice stayed even. Clinical. The resident exhaled sharply. She's overinterpreting, he said. We already established that. The attending stepped forward. She's new, he added. Overly cautious. We'll clear the flag and proceed. The agent didn't look at them. His attention remained on Mara. What kind of inconsistency? He asked. Mara adjusted the foreline slightly. Checked the flow. Then spoke. The outer bandage is hospital grade, she said. The inner layer is not. Different material. Different application sequence. She paused. Not for effect. For accuracy. The for insertion point shows field-style access, she continued. And there's a coded marking near the line that doesn't belong to civilian systems. Silence. The room absorbed the words. The attending shook his head once. That's speculation, he said. We don't base protocol on interpretation. Mara didn't respond to him. She kept her attention on the patient. The agent spoke again. And the flag. Mara's hands remained steady. Chain of custody risk, she said. No verified transfer documentation. Escorts not matching standard reporting behavior. One of the escorts shifted slightly behind the agent. The smallest movement. But enough. The agent noticed. So did Mara. The attending stepped closer now. You're making this sound like a security issue, he said. This is a medical case. Mara nodded once. It is, she said. Then act like it. The words came sharper now. Because the room had divided. Because authority was being challenged. Without being challenged directly. Moral tension settled quietly. Mara could explain more. Give context. Show the depth behind what she was seeing. But that would open a door she had spent years keeping closed. Or she could stay within the boundary. Say only what the room could accept. Risk not being believed. She chose the boundary. The pattern doesn't match the story, she said. That's enough to document concern. No history. No background. Just observation. The agent studied her for a moment. Then nodded once. Small. But final. The attending exhaled sharply. This is wasting time, he said. We need to move this patient. As if answering him. The monitor changed. Subtle. But wrong. The rhythm shifted. Pressure dipping. Breathing tightening. The anesthetic effect from transport wearing thin. Vitals dropping, the resident said. The room snapped back. Conversation ended. Because the patient had taken control again. Let's move, the attending said, stepping toward the bed. Mara was already there. Her hand moved to the patient's side. Not dramatic. Not forceful. Just faster. Wait, she said. The word was quiet. But it landed. The attending stopped. Not because of authority. Because of timing. Mara's eye stayed on the monitor. Then the chest. Then the wound. Her voice remained steady. Pressure is compensating, not stabilizing, she said. We move now, we lose him in transit. The resident hesitated. Hands hovering. The attending frowned. We don't have the full picture yet. We don't need it, Mara said. Not louder. Just clearer. She adjusted the oxygen flow. Check the line again. Immediate priority is stabilization, she continued. Not movement. The agent watched. Silent. The escorts didn't speak. Didn't interfere. Because the room had shifted again. From argument to survival. The monitor dipped further. Then steadied slightly. A narrow window. Mara moved within it. Increase support, she said to the resident. He followed. Instinct overriding hesitation. Prep for pressure control, she added. The charge nurse moved. Already aligning with the sequence. The attending paused. Watching. Calculating. Because the pattern was becoming clear. Because the patient was responding. To her. Mara didn't look at him. Didn't wait for permission. She adjusted the setup. Repositioned the line. Corrected the angle. Small movements. Exact. The monitor responded. Not dramatically. But enough. Hold that, she said. The resident nodded. Focus now. The room quieted, not because the conflict was resolved, because it had been replaced. The agent stepped slightly to the side, giving her space. Not formally, not announced, but intentional. And in that moment, without claiming control, without raising her voice, Mara set the tempo of the room, because the patient needed it, and nothing else mattered. The room did not return to normal. It narrowed, focused, as if everything outside the trauma bay had been reduced to background noise. The patient's breathing steadied for the moment. The monitor held, a fragile balance. The agent stepped closer to the bed, not to intervene, to confirm. He looked down at the patient, then at the escorts. A brief exchange passed between them, unspoken. Then he turned back to the room. "This patient is under restricted federal protection," he said. The words were measured, limited, given carefully. The charge nurse frowned. "What does that mean for us?" she asked. "It means," the agent replied, "you continue medical care. Nothing else changes." That wasn't true. Everyone in the room knew it, because everything had already changed. The attending crossed his arms. "If he's under federal custody, why is he here?" he asked. A pause. Not hesitation. Control. He was not intended to enter a civilian system, the agent said. Silence followed. Heavy, because that answer created more problems than it solved. The resident looked between them. Then how did he end up here? The agent didn't respond immediately. His eyes shifted briefly toward the escorts. They remained still, composed, but not relaxed. That was enough. The implication settled. Something had gone wrong. Before the patient arrived, the hospital had not received a controlled transfer. It had intercepted one. Unintentionally. The charge nurse took a step back. "So we're holding someone we weren't supposed to see," she said. No one corrected her, because it was accurate enough. The attending exhaled. "Then we need full information," he said. "We can't treat blind." The agent met his gaze. "You'll receive what you need." Not what he asked for. The distinction mattered. Behind them, the escorts remained in position, close enough to the patient, but not engaged in the care. Watching. Always watching. Not full detail. Mara noted it. 2 escorts. No rotation. No perimeter support. No secondary coverage. Incomplete. She didn't react. Didn't shift her posture. But the pattern locked into place. This wasn't a full protection detail. It was a fragment, which meant the rest was missing or compromised. The room continued its conversation. Authority pressing against authority. Medicine against control. Mara stepped slightly closer to the patient. Her focus stayed where it had always been. On the body, not the narrative around it. She watched the breathing, not just the rate. The depth, the resistance, the subtle delay between inhale and response. Her eyes moved to the skin, tone, temperature, then the line, fluid response. The pattern didn't match a single injury. There was something else. Hidden, delayed. The kind of problem that didn't announce itself. Until it was too late. The resident spoke again. "We stabilize and move him," he said. "That's still the plan." The attending nodded. "Yes." Simple. Direct. Because movement felt like progress. Because staying still felt like failure. Mara's eyes stayed on the monitor. The numbers were holding, but not correcting. Compensation, not recovery. She followed the breathing again. There. A subtle asymmetry. Small. Easy to miss. But consistent. Her mind moved through it. Layer by layer. Not fast. Accurate. Rush transfer. Field intervention. Controlled bleed. But secondary compromise. Untreated. Masked by initial stabilization. If they moved him, they would lose the window. Moral tension settled quietly. She could stay silent. Let the sequence continue. Remain the quiet nurse. Invisible. Safe. Oh. She could step in again. Draw attention. Confirm what the agent had already begun to suspect. That she was not who she appeared to be. Her hands remained steady. Her voice, when it came, was the same. Calm. Measured. Don't move him yet, she said. The attending turned. Immediate. We don't have time to wait. Mara shook her head slightly. We don't have time to move. The resident frowned. That doesn't make sense. Mara didn't look at him. She pointed once. Not dramatically. Just enough. Breathing pattern, she said. It's not matching the injury we're treating. The attending's expression tightened. We already addressed the primary. There's a second issue, Mara said. No interruption. No escalation. Just continuation. The room paused. Because the statement carried weight. Because it aligned with what they were starting to feel. What kind of issue? The resident asked. Mara adjusted the oxygen line again. Checked the seal. Something affecting ventilation, she said. Not visible. Not primary. But it's there. The agent watched her closely now. The attending hesitated. Just a fraction. Then looked back at the patient. At the monitor. At the breathing. Seeing it. For the first time. Confirm, he said quietly. The resident moved. Hands faster now. Checking. Reassessing. The pattern revealed itself. Subtle. But real. He's right, the resident said, then corrected himself quickly. She's right. The attending exhaled slowly. The plan shifted. Not publicly, but completely. Mara stepped back half a pace. Returning to the edge, as if she had never stepped forward. The agent didn't look away from her. Because the confirmation had landed. Not just about the patient, but about her. And in that moment, it became clear to everyone in the room. This wasn't just the wrong patient. In the wrong hospital. It was the wrong situation. To underestimate the person who had seen it first. The lockdown did not stay contained to one room. It spread. Quietly at first. Then everywhere at once. Down the corridor, a stretcher waited outside imaging. Unmoved. A patient lay on it, eyes open, tracking the ceiling lights that no longer changed. Why aren't we moving? He asked. No one answered. Because no one could. In the waiting area, voices rose. Not loud enough to panic, but close. A woman stood, pacing between chairs. My husband needs to be seen, she said. What is happening? The front desk nurse tried to explain. We're in a controlled situation, she said. The words didn't help. Because they didn't explain anything. Inside the ER, The tension sharpened. Every delay became visible. Every unanswered question multiplied. The charge nurse moved faster now. Reassigning. Adjusting. Trying to keep the system moving inside a space that no longer allowed movement. At the edge of the trauma bay, the hospital administrator had arrived. Suit jacket still on. Expression tight. "This is unacceptable," he said to the lead agent. "You can't shut down patient flow without coordination." The agent didn't raise his voice. "Containment takes priority over patient care." The administrator asked. "Over uncontrolled risk." The administrator stepped closer. "You are in a civilian medical facility, and you have a protected individual in your care," the agent replied. The words met, neither yielding. Behind them, the room continued to function. Because it had to. Because the patient on the bed still needed attention. Mara stayed where she had been. At the side. Hands moving when needed. Still. Precise. The patient's breathing had changed again. Not worse. But not resolving. The second issue was still there. Still shaping the outcome. She adjusted the line. Checked the monitor. Then glanced once toward the corridor. Movement. But not normal movement. Agents repositioning. Not randomly. Deliberately. As if something else had entered the equation. A nurse passed by quickly. "They're locking down the ICU corridor too," she said under her breath. The charge nurse frowned. That wasn't part of the initial. She stopped. Because nothing about this followed initial plans anymore. The resident leaned closer to Mara. "They think there's a second problem," he said quietly. "What kind?" she asked. He shook his head. "Rumor is someone inside might be involved." The word settled. Not loudly, but heavily. Inside. Mara didn't react outwardly, but her attention shifted. Not away from the patient. Wider. She scanned the room. The agents. The escorts. The staff. Looking for something that didn't fit. Not behavior. Pattern. The escorts again. Their positioning hadn't changed. Too fixed. Too narrow. They were guarding the patient, not the space. Which meant they weren't expecting external breach here. Their concern was different. Containment of information. Not force. Mara's eyes moved to the chart. Then back to the patient. Then to the agent. Pieces aligning. Not fully, but enough. The transfer had been incomplete. The detail fragmented. The hospital an unintended stop. And now, a lockdown expanding beyond the patient. Which meant the risk wasn't just him. It was how he got here. And who knew? The administrator's voice rose slightly. "You need to tell me if there's an active threat," he said. The agent held his gaze. "There is a controlled situation." That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting. The room tightened again. Because the absence of information was worse than the wrong information. Mara stepped into room 7 briefly. The small boy was still awake. Eyes tracking the hallway. "What's happening now?" he asked. Mara adjusted his blanket again. Checked his pulse. "Nothing you need to worry about," she said. Same tone. Same control. The mother watched her. Not fully reassured, but anchored. Mara stayed a moment longer than necessary. Just enough. Then stepped back out. Returning to the trauma bay. Her hands moved automatically. Rechecking. Repositioning. maintaining, while her mind continued working. There. A detail. Small. But wrong. She looked again at the patient's arm. At the line. At the marking she had noticed earlier. Then at the way the escorts watched it. Not casually. Intentionally. As if that detail mattered more than the rest. Which meant it wasn't just identification. It was traceable. Recognizable. Something that could be followed. If someone knew what to look for. Her gaze shifted slowly across the room. Staff moving. Agents positioned. One of the nurses near the corridor paused. Just for a second. Looking toward the patient. Then away. Nothing obvious. Nothing actionable. But enough to confirm the thought. The story wasn't complete. Not outside. Inside. The lead agent stepped closer again. Not to the patient this time. Tamara. He didn't speak immediately. Just studied her. The same way she had studied the room. Not as a nurse. Not anymore. As someone who understood patterns. As someone who recognized gaps. You're seeing more than you're saying, he said quietly. Mara didn't look at him. Her hands remained steady. I'm treating the patient, she replied. The agent's expression didn't change. But the recognition settled. He knew. Not who she was exactly, but what she was capable of. And that changed his posture. Subtly. He adjusted his position. Closer to her. Not protective. Not controlling. Aligned. Mara felt it. The shift. The cost. Because being seen like that meant stepping back into a world she had left. Without choosing to. She didn't acknowledge it. Didn't respond. But the realization settled. This lockdown wasn't just about keeping the patient safe. It was about finding out how he had been compromised, and whether that compromise was already inside the building. The patient dropped without warning. No gradual decline. No clean signal. One moment the numbers held. Fragile, controlled. The next they broke. Pressure collapsed. The monitor tone sharpened. Breathing faltered. The room snapped inward. BP falling, the resident said. The anesthetic support from transport had thinned too far. The second problem, the one still not fully named, was now in control. The attending stepped forward. Hands ready. By searching the field. But his movement slowed. Not from lack of skill. From uncertainty. Because the pattern didn't match standard sequence. Because the correct move wasn't one he used often. And because the room had changed. Agents present. Authority divided. Every action now carried weight beyond medicine. What's the call? The resident asked. The attending didn't answer immediately. He looked at the monitor. Then at the wound. Then at the patient's chest. Trying to force the situation back into something familiar. It didn't fit. The delay stretched. Not long. But long enough. Mara was already moving. Not forward. Into alignment. Her eyes tracked the pattern. Pressure. Breathing. Response. The sequence resolved in her mind. Clear. Immediate. She knew exactly what had to happen. And she knew what it meant. Using it would cross the line she had kept intact. It would show where she had learned. What she had done. The kind of situation she had worked in. There would be no returning to Rukit after that. The choice wasn't dramatic. It didn't feel like one. It felt like a threshold. Step forward, or let the patient fall past recovery. Her hands remained steady. Her voice, when it came, was the same as before. Calm. Even. We need to relieve the pressure now, she said. The attending looked at her. Immediate. How? Mara didn't answer with explanation. She answered with sequence. Adjust ventilation support, she said. Increase flow, but control the rate. The anesthesiologist moved. No hesitation. Prep for decompression, Mara continued. Left side. Now. The resident froze. Are you sure? He asked. Mara met his eyes briefly. Do it. No force. Just certainty. The attending stepped in. This is outside. If we wait, we lose him, Mara said. Same tone. No escalation. Just fact. The monitor dipped again. Further. The anesthesiologist spoke. He's not compensating anymore. That settled it. Not the argument. The decision. The attending hesitated one last time. Then stepped back half a pace. Not surrender. Recognition. The agent watched the exchange. Then spoke once. Proceed. No explanation. No authority claimed. Just alignment. The room shifted. Not loudly, but completely. Mara moved. Guiding. Not performing every step, but setting the order. Angle, she said, adjusting the resident's position. Not there. Here. He followed. Hand steadier now, because the instruction matched what he was seeing. Hold, she said. The scrub nurse aligned the tools. Already anticipating, because the pattern had become clear. Mara's hands adjusted the oxygen line again. Fine-tuning. Slow it, she said to the anesthesiologist. Don't overcorrect. He nodded. Got it. The sequence moved. One step ahead of collapse. Every instruction placed just before failure. No wasted words. No excess movement. The monitor responded. Not immediately. Then. Slightly. Pressure rising. Small. But real. Hold that, Mara said. The resident reinforced. The line stabilized. The breathing shifted. Not normal, but functional. The second problem. Contained. For now. The room stayed silent, because they were watching it happen. Not guessing. Not hoping. Seeing. The patient's body turned. Not fully, but enough. From loss to response. The attending exhaled slowly. Watching. Understanding. The line between hesitation and outcome had just been drawn. And she had crossed it. Mara stepped back half a pace. Not claiming space. Releasing it. The sequence no longer needed full control. Just maintenance. Continue support, she said quietly. The anesthesiologist nodded. Stable enough. The words carried weight. Not safe. Not resolved. But alive. Enough to hold through the lockdown. Enough to survive the delay. The agent's gaze remained on Mara. Not questioning. Not confirming. Recognizing. Because the decision she had made was not one learned in a classroom. Mara didn't meet his eyes. Her attention returned to the patient, to the monitor, to the work. because the choice had already been made. And the only thing that mattered now was that the patient had lived through it. The room did not release all at once. It loosened, slowly, like pressure easing out of something that had nearly failed. The monitor held, breathing supported, numbers no longer falling. "Maintain," the anesthesiologist said quietly. No one answered, because everyone was already doing it. The patient remained where he was. Not moved, not rushed, held in place, stabilized just enough to survive the gap between crisis and control. The lead agent stepped back from the bed, spoke into a low device clipped at his collar. Short phrases, controlled, no details that carried across the room. Within minutes, more personnel arrived. Different from before. Heavier presence. Not loud. Not aggressive. But complete. The kind of coverage that should have been there from the beginning. 2 agents moved to the corridor. Another took position near the entrance. The escort shifted slightly, their posture changing. Relief, but contained, because this was no longer a partial detail. This was full custody. The charge nurse watched the transition, then looked at the attending. "What happens now?" she asked. The attending didn't answer immediately. His eyes stayed on the patient, then moved, briefly. "Tamara." Just long enough. Then away. "We continue care until they move him," he said. His voice had changed. Not weaker. Quieter. More precise. The resident stood at the foot of the bed. Hands still. Watching the monitor. Then Mara. Then back again. Trying to reconcile what had just happened. Because the sequence didn't match what he had been taught. Because the person who had directed it was not the one who was supposed to. The agents coordinated quickly. A stretcher was brought in. Different. Reinforced. Prepared. Not hospital-issued. The lead agent spoke once more. "We're transferring him now." No request. No discussion. The attending nodded. "Vitals are holding," he said. "Barely. That's enough." The words were flat, but they carried certainty. The team moved. Carefully. No wasted motion. Line secured. Oxygen maintained. Monitoring transferred. The patient was lifted. Shifted. Positioned. Every movement controlled. Because the margin was still narrow. Mara stepped back. Out of the way. Not disengaging. Just no longer needed at the center. The stretcher locked into place. The agents formed around it. A complete perimeter now. No gaps. No hesitation. The lead agent looked at Mara once. Then turned. The team moved out. Down the corridor. Through doors that opened only for them. Then closed. Sealed again behind. The room emptied. Not completely, but enough. The pressure gone. The questions left behind. The charge nurse exhaled slowly. "That was not normal," she said. No one disagreed. The administrator stood near the station, already speaking into a phone that had come back to life. "Begin reopening procedures," he said. Controlled. One by one, the systems reversed. Doors unlocked. Elevators resumed. Lights shifted back to standard. The hospital returned to motion. But not to what it had been. Because something had changed. Not visibly, but completely. The resident leaned against the counter, ran a hand through his hair. "She saw it first," he said quietly. No one answered, because they all had. The attending stood still for a moment longer, then approached Mara. Stopped just short of her. "You made the right call," he said. "Not praise. Not apology. Recognition." Mara nodded once. Nothing more. No explanation. No expansion. Because the outcome spoke for itself. The attending held her gaze briefly, then stepped away. Conversation finished. The lead agent returned. Alone this time. The room quieted again. He stopped in front of Mara, close enough that his voice didn't carry. "That flag," he said. "It forced the lockdown." Mara didn't respond. He continued. "If it hadn't been placed, we wouldn't have contained this." A pause. Measured. Which means we wouldn't have controlled who saw him, or who reached him. The implication settled. Not stated fully, but clear. Something inside the system had been at risk. Mara nodded once. "I documented what I saw," she said. The agent studied her. "Longer this time." "You've done more than that before," he said. Not a question. Mara didn't answer. Because answering would confirm. Because silence still protected something. He accepted it. A small nod. Then stepped back. "Take care of your patients," he said. Simple. Then he turned. Left the room. And with him, the last visible piece of the situation. Mara stood still for a moment. Then moved. Back to the station. Pulled up a chart. Typed. Medication updates. Timestamps. Precise entries. Routine work. Behind her, the ER slowly returned to motion. Voices resumed. Patients moved. Staff adjusted. But the space held something new. A quiet understanding that the person they had overlooked had seen everything first. Mara finished the chart. Saved it. Closed the screen. Her hands remained steady. But the realization settled in quietly. She had been seen. Not just by the room. By the system. By the kind of machinery she had left behind. And that kind of attention did not disappear easily. She picked up the next chart. Read it. Stepped into the next room. Because the work did not stop. Even when everything else had changed. Dawn didn't arrive all at once. It seeped in. A pale, thin light pressing through the high windows, softening the edges of the fluorescent glare that had carried the night. The storm outside had faded into a steady drizzle. The ambulance bay glistened under dim morning grey. Inside, the hospital moved again. Not normally. Not yet. But moving. Voices returned in low tones. Monitors continued their steady rhythm. Stretchers rolled. Doors opened without resistance. The systems were back. But the atmosphere wasn't. It carried something quieter now. A memory. Mara stepped into the corridor from the supply room, her bag tucked into a locker, her badge clipped back into place. Plain. Unremarkable. Just a name. Just a role. At the nurse's station, conversation shifted as she approached. Not stopped. Adjusted. A resident who would have joked hours earlier simply nodded. Morning. Mara returned it. Nothing more. The charge nurse handed her a chart. Room 6 needs discharge prep, she said. Same tone as before. But not quite. Measured. Aware. Mara took the chart. Got it. No extra words. She moved down the hallway. Past the trauma bay. Now empty. Cleaned. Reset. As if nothing had happened there. But the space held it. Quietly. In the way people looked at it without stopping. In the way no one spoke about it directly. Room 6. An elderly patient sat upright, waiting. Mara checked the 4. Adjusted the line. Reviewed the discharge notes. Routine. Steady. Her hands moved the same way they had all night. Nothing different. Nothing revealed. Behind her, 2 nurses spoke in low voices. That was her, right? One asked. I think so. What even was that? I don't know. They didn't ask her. Because they didn't know how. Because the gap between what they had seen and what they understood was too wide. Mara finished the check, documented the update, moved on. At the end of a corridor, the administrator waited. Suit jacket now creased. Eyes tired. Miss Quinn. Formal again. Controlled. We'll need to review last night's incident. Mara stopped. Listened. We're preparing a report, he continued. Something that keeps the narrative contained. The word lingered. Contained. Mara nodded once. I documented everything in the chart, she said. That's part of it, he replied. But we may need to clarify how certain decisions were made. Mara held his gaze. Calm. Neutral. The patient received appropriate care, she said. Nothing more. No explanation. No ownership. The administrator studied her for a moment, then nodded. We'll follow up. He stepped aside. Conversation closed. Mara moved past him. Down the hall. Toward the nurse's station again. The lead agent stood near the far wall. Alone. No escort. No visible presence behind him. Just waiting. Mara slowed slightly. Not stopping. He stepped forward. Quinn. Her name. Without title. Without formality. She turned. Met his gaze. Up close, his expression was the same. Controlled. But the recognition was no longer subtle. It was certain. You recognize the markers, he said. Not a question. Mara didn't respond. He continued. You flagged the transfer pattern, the custody gap, the timing, a pause, measured. That's not something a new ER nurse does. Mara's posture didn't change. I documented what I saw, she said. The same answer. The same boundary. He held it for a moment, then nodded once. Understood. Another pause. You're not on any list I can access, he added. Which means you were placed carefully. Not accusation. Acknowledgement. Mara said nothing, because silence was still the only safe answer. He exhaled lightly. If you choose to step back into that world, he said, you won't have to ask. The offer was quiet. Not official, but real. Mara shook her head once. No. Simple. Final. He studied her again, then gave a small nod. Then fix your system, he said. Mara blinked once. What? The flag, he said. It worked. But it's not standard here. Mara nodded slightly. Preload it into trauma protocols, she said. Make it visible earlier. Not buried. He considered that, then nodded. That would help. A beat. Then he stepped back. Take care, Quinn. He turned, walked down the corridor, and disappeared into the same system he had controlled hours earlier. Mara stood for a moment, then moved. Back to the station. Picked up a chart. Reviewed it. Roommate. A minor case. Medication timing off by 10 minutes. She corrected it. Adjusted the entry. Clean. Precise. Invisible. The hospital moved around her. Normal again. Or close enough. The patient from the night was gone. Transferred. Unnamed. Unspoken. Alive. That was all that mattered. Mara finished the chart. Closed it. Set it aside. Then reached up. Straightened her badge. Clipped it firmly into place. Just a nurse. Just another shift. She stepped into the next room. Adjusted a monitor. Smoothed the blanket. Checked her line. And disappeared back into the work. Quiet. By choice. Exactly where she intended to stay.